The 2025 Nobel Prize in Economics,
where we will present this year's Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in Memory of Alfred Nobel.
We have very good research there. Reconcile this smart industrial policy.
Their approaches are very different. Joel Mokyr is an economic historian and has really dig deep into the historical evidence that he uses.
formerly known as Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences, has this time been awarded to three prominent economists of the world. First one is Joel Mokyr, second one is Philippe Aghion, and third one is Peter Howitt. Now, the reason they have been awarded the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences is because of their pioneering work in explaining innovation-driven economic growth, and economic growth driven through technological progression alongside creative breakthrough, that is innovation. Now, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has announced that half the prize will go to Joel Mokyr for his profound contribution towards explaining how technological progression can lead to economic growth, and half of the prize will be shared amongst Aghion and Howitt for explaining that how creative breakthroughs, how innovation can lead to economic growth over a sustained period of time. Now, both of the research combined highlights and shows us that how technological progression over a longer period of time and innovation can act as a catalyst and driver for long-term prosperity and long-term economic growth, not just in several nations but in the entire world. Now, what exactly their contribution towards economic sciences are, what exactly is the theory which made them win the Nobel Prize in Economics, all these things we'll be trying to understand in this particular session. Hello, my name is Philippe and you're watching Perspective. Now, first let's talk about Joel Mokyr. Now, Joel Mokyr is from Netherlands and he's a professor at a Northwestern University. Now, he's recognized for identifying the prerequisites for a sustained growth through technological progression, which I earlier stated as well, that through technological progression, how can economic growth be prolonged? That is what Joel Mokyr is concerned about. Now, the second person is Philippe Aghion, who's from France. Now, he's a professor at Collège de France, INSEAD, and also London School of Economics. Now, the third Nobel laureate is Peter Howitt, who's from Canada and teaches at Brown University. Now, Aghion and Howitt, they jointly worked on a theory of sustained growth through creative destruction, which is why they have won the Nobel Prize, which means they have won the Nobel Prize for a theory which they have framed for sustained growth through creative destruction. That means how innovation can lead to sustained economic growth, sustained economic prosperity over a longer period of time. Now, I hope the distinction is very much clear amongst you that Joel Mokyr is concerned with technological progression and the other two, that is Aghion and Howitt, are concerned with creative destruction and creative breakthrough, that is innovation. But the motive of both the groups, that is three of them, are same, that how technological progression and how creative breakthrough, that is innovation, can lead to sustained economic growth. That means how people's life can be better off through technological progression and how people's life can be better off through creative destruction over a longer period of time. Now, as you would know, there are two different sides of theory available here. Now, as you can now very well understand that there are two different strands of theory which are working here. One is of Joel Mokyr and other is of the other two Nobel laureates, that is Aghion and Howitt. Now, first of all, let us understand the theory in detail about Joel Mokyr. And it is actually known as the theory of useful knowledge. Now, if you dig deep into the research of Joel Mokyr, it actually asks a question, a very important question, that why economic growth has accelerated and sustained over the last 200 years, breaking centuries of stagnation. Which means what happened in the last 200 or 300 years that economic growth has sustained, has accelerated, leaving behind the earlier stagnation which was there in the last many decades and last many centuries. What is the reason? That is a simple question which Joel Mokyr's research asks about. And if you dig more deep, you'll find the answer to this in economic history. And also, this theory, it identifies that how did the systematic creation and application of knowledge triggered the industrial revolution in the world and how it continues to sustain progress even today. Which means that in the last 200-300 years, what has actually happened which has led to accelerated and sustained economic growth? The answer is industrial revolution. But the reason is much more deeper, that is the application and creation of knowledge. This is what the theory suggests about, which is why the theory is named also after this, that is the theory of useful knowledge. Now let us understand in detail about this useful knowledge part of this particular theory. Now Joel Mokyr, he proposed that sustained economic growth is a resultant of a continuous flow of useful knowledge. And he divided this useful knowledge into two interconnected and intertwined parts. He says there are two types of useful knowledge. One is propositional knowledge and another one is prescriptive knowledge. Now the propositional knowledge, it suggests and it talks about why things work, which means propositional knowledge is the knowledge which helps us to understand why a certain thing is working, what is the reason for a thing to work, and it is derived from the basis of scientific theories, natural observations and reasoning, that why a certain thing is working. So the question why is at the heart of propositional knowledge. There is another knowledge that is prescriptive knowledge. Now the propositional knowledge is about the question of why, but the prescriptive knowledge is about the question how. That is knowing how things actually work, rather than knowing why things are working, knowing how things are working, which means application-oriented approach. Which is why prescriptive knowledge is more application-oriented, it's more practical, and it involves reproducible instructions or recipes that enable implementation of a particular theory. Simple examples are technical drawings, execution manuals, process manuals, which suggest how a thing is done, rather than why a thing is done. Now let us see how he applied this propositional and prescriptive knowledge into this Industrial Revolution. Now you remember the question which we asked. The question was that what happened in the last 200 to 300 years that economic growth has sustained? He said the answer is Industrial Revolution. But the inherent answer is that we started applying knowledge. But which type of knowledge? He again came up to a very specific point that before Industrial Revolution, we had knowledge, but that knowledge was propositional, which means we were concerned with why. But in Industrial Revolution, during Industrial Revolution, when Industrial Revolution started, we shifted from propositional knowledge to prescriptive knowledge. Which is why Joel Mokyr argued that before Industrial Revolution, the innovators, the scientists, they had ample amount of propositional knowledge, but they lacked prescriptive knowledge, which limited their ability to apply scientific ideas in a real world population and in real world production. Which is why application was missing, but the knowledge remained. But then the question would be that when did the transformation happen? And the transformation happened during the period of Industrial Revolution. So according to Mokyr, in the 17th, 16th centuries, both the centuries when scientists started to use precise measurements, they started doing controlled experiments, and they started having reproducible results which can be reproduced again and again. That is when actually the transformation began. Which means he suggested that in this new scientific outlook, which was based on not propositional but prescriptive knowledge, a new feedback loop was created. Which means a feedback loop between theoretical understanding and practical application got created. The theoretical understanding is important, but if we apply that theoretical understanding in the real life world, real life production, we will achieve a practical implementation, practical application. And this dynamic exchange, it laid the foundation for continuous technological development in the world. And this technological development is the reason why there has been continuous economic growth in the world. This is what Joel Mokyr's theory argues. Now this theory which Mokyr gives, he gives certain examples also to support the arguments which he has given. One example is in relation to the steam engine, because of which usually we say that the Industrial Revolution in the world actually started. Now the steam engine's evolution, according to Mokyr, it was enabled by deeper insights into atmospheric pressure and vacuums. So atmospheric pressure and vacuums knowledge, when implemented and put into practicality, gave us the steam engine. That is what he says. Also, second, he talks about the advancement of steel production. He says it was made by understanding that how oxygen reduces carbon content in molten iron. Through that, the steel production also started. So basically, by having a theoretical understanding, that is propositional knowledge, we attained prescriptive knowledge and we transferred from theoretical to practicality, and that was the era of 16th to 17th century when the transformation began, and the actual transformation could be seen right after Industrial Revolution, when because of technological progression, economic sustainability, economic growth in the world could be witnessed. Now there are numerous lessons which we can learn and which we can get from this theory of Joel Mokyr. One amongst them is that an idea can only succeed when it is supported by abundant practicality. Also, it is supported by technical and commercial skills. So practical, technical and commercial skills are very important for an idea to be successful. Otherwise, idea remains at ideation stage only and it is of no use to the world. Which is why from this the government can take a policy takeaway and can understand that how government can invest more into skilling, into vocational training, and also to transform innovation, which can eventually lead to sustained prosperity for the country, for the world, for the states, for the cities, whatever the area might be. Also, one more thing which Joel Mokyr's theory emphasized upon was openness to change. which is why the theory also argues, and it is almost certain, that policymakers should also foster a culture that embraces technological progression, and also it should embrace technological disruption and mitigate the social cost through inclusive, adaptive institutions which can help in more and more innovation, more and more implementation of the ideas into practical applicability. So that was the theory of knowledge of Joel Mokyr. Now let us shift to the theory given by Aghion and Howitt. And that is the theory of creative destruction, which means the theory of innovation, which talks about modeling innovation and economic growth. Now, both the economists, Philippe Aghion and Peter Howitt, they created a mathematical model for creative destruction. They explain that how innovation drives economic growth and can lead to economic growth by continuously replacing the older technologies and finding new ones. And this model, which talks about how innovation leads to economic growth, it also has an assumption. It assumes that the firms who are investing in research and development, the firms who are investing in R&D, are doing so to create a patentable product which can be patented, and the product is new and having certain new scientific significance, and because of that creation, it can give the firms a temporary monopoly power as well. However, we can very surely say that innovation is cumulative and it is competitive, but when a new firm develops a better product than the incumbent or than the present one, the profit shifts and the market dominance also shifts to that particular firm. And for a temporary period, that should be promoted. Otherwise, there won't be any motivator for a firm to innovate, to put large sums of money in research and development, which is why patents are very important in securing innovation and promoting innovation in the world. But according to this theory suggests that this continuous cycle of innovation and replacement, it fuels long-term economic growth in the world. It also brings instability and structural changes sometimes, but long-term economic growth is important and is inevitable, which is why the framework given by Aghion and Howitt, it allows the economist to study the optimal level of research and development investment, the optimal level of R&D investment, which is to be done in a free open market, and should be balancing innovation incentives against the disruptions caused by technological progress. Now, the model of creative destruction given by Philippe Aghion and Peter Howitt, it also talks a lot about policy making and how the government should be spending money in research and development. It highlights in a very peculiar way that when the government spends money on research and development, it must always try to balance between encouraging innovation and avoiding inefficiencies, because the resultants can be two. When the government spends money on research and development, either it can create inefficiency and a lot of social cost, or it can lead to a lot of social benefit and social cost might be minimal, so it might encourage more innovations. Let us see how. Now, on one hand, when new innovations are encouraged and new innovations are replacing the older technologies, societies, they continue to benefit even from the older technologies, even after the creators, they stop getting the benefit. Which means after the patent of the product is over, it is the society at large who is going to benefit of that product. Now, in this particular case, innovations are maximized, innovations are encouraged, because in this case, the social spillover effect, it justifies the public subsidies for research and development. Because eventually, over a period of time, after the patent is over, the social benefit is going to go towards the public. And it ensures the firms also to remain motivated to innovate despite diminishing private returns. That is one case. But on the other hand, there can be a lot of inefficiencies as well, which means when an innovation offers only incremental returns for the private firms, and when innovation offers only incremental improvements, but yields disproportionately higher monopoly profits for the innovating firms, in that case, the social benefits are less. And excessive research and development spending by the government can become socially inefficient because the money is of the public. The government is spending money on research and development, but disproportionate profits are earned by those monopoly firms, which is why in such cases, subsidies might overstimulate research investment, but it leads to limited social gains. Which is why, to conclude, the right amount of spending, the optimal spending on research and development by the government should depend on the societal structure, should depend on the economic structure, Which is why, to summarize, the right level of research and development funding or optimal level of R&D spending by the government should depend on the structure of the economy, should depend on the pace of technological change, and also the extent of knowledge spillovers. A balance between all of them should be struck by the policymakers in order to achieve sustained innovation-driven economic growth. Now finally, these were the two set of theories, first given by Joel Mokyr, that is the theory of useful knowledge, and second, the theory of creative destruction, which were given by Philippe Aghion and Peter Howitt. I hope you gain some new perspective from these theories. Whatever your doubts are, do let me know in the comment section. I'll be very happy to answer them. All the very best and have a beautiful day. Thank you, everyone.